Ohio State lost 2 recruiting battles to those pesky Oregon Ducks.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to a Monday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Here on Monday, July 1st in the year 2024. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. During today's episode, Locked On's recruiting analyst Brian Smith is back with us once again. We'll dive into the Buckeyes losing recruiting battles to the Ducks, if Damian Shanklin will commit to Ohio State, and if it's wise for the Buckeyes to still pursue running backs in the class of 2025. A lot of good recruiting stuff coming your way. There'll be more coming your way later this week. Let's not waste any time. Bring Brian in and touch on a very important topic. And as we welcome in Brian Smith, I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Brian, I like having you come on at the beginning of a week because there's a lot of stuff that happens over a weekend that we don't really get your insight on until later in the week when you come on the show. Oregon is one of those teams right now that's one of the 4 that's a newcomer to the Big Ten. They play Ohio State October 12th. They actually host that matchup between the Ducks and the Buckeyes. And all of a sudden, Brian, we know that Dan Lanning has a good thing going right now over there in Eugene. They're going to be one of those teams that's probably going to be playing in the Big Ten championship game this year. And they're stealing Ohio State recruiting targets. First, they got Jordon Davison. Then they got Dorian Brew. What are your thoughts on those guys committing to Oregon?
Well, you and I have kind of been trying to figure out the running back situation with Ohio State recruiting for a while. This just in. They're fine at running back with the 2 kids they got. Now, Jordan Davison's a great player, but he wasn't a need. He would have been a luxury. Now, the other situation has other parts to it that make it a little more iffy. Brew's a kid that's lived in Ohio at one point. Now, he's not just in Ohio, and he's Texas, etc., but everybody and their brother thought that he was going to pick Ohio State. And they've got a really good staff of recruiters. Their DB coach is good. He's a good recruiter. What am I missing? Like, when I was told that he was going to Oregon, I'm like, really? Because, like, what's the connection there? Maybe he's a kid that just wants to go outside the realm. But this is, again, another one of those cases where, like, all the signs point to one school, then the kid doesn't do it. And it's why I go out of my way to just flat say I don't like doing predictions anymore unless a kid basically tells me he's going to a school and it's face-to-face. That's it. That's why I go to these camps and stuff and you get off-the-record information. It's the only way to do it because the schools, I've given up on college coaches knowing because they always think they're getting everybody. I don't care what staff it is, Ohio State, Texas, whatever. So how do you not get the kid that you've got all the pieces in play, you're a national title contender, he's been from your state, you recruited. What am I missing? Jay, I'm going to let you tell me and explain to everybody how this happened because I sure don't know.
If I had the answers, Brian, we would be, this conversation would be different than what it's going to be. You have helped me do something that I did not do previously. Is kind of just realize recruiting is weird. You're dealing with high school kids, and even when you think you're going to do one thing, they do something else. The one thought I have is maybe he thought he was going to get playing time a little bit earlier than expected.
That's possible.
But if that's the case, you already knew that Alford and Sanchez are already committed to Ohio State, so you could have made your commitment a little bit sooner. But once again, I don't know. I don't know if it's money. I don't know if it's location. I don't know if he wants to just pave his own path. I don't know. But the Davison one shocked me a little bit because it did seem like Ohio State was the front runner for a long time. And then after Isaiah West committed, after Davidson's visit, things kind of trended a different way. Do they really need Dorian Brew? That's the question I've been asking myself, Brian. Now I'm going to turn it back over to you. Does Ohio State need a Brew-type player in this recruiting class?
There are a couple things that I've learned. The answer is always both in recruiting, meaning, do I need this player or that one? Both. Because Nick Saban wanted both.
Yeah.
I don't need any more knowledge than that. Urban Meyer wanted both. You know what I mean? Bo Schembechler wanted both. These are not hard things to look at. Your point about whether or not he was going to play early brings up the following question, and I don't know the kid. Is he dead set on playing outside or boundary receiver or corner? If that's the case, then we got a problem. Because you can only have so many cooks in the kitchen, and they got arguably the two best corners committed in the country. It's really hard for me to figure out what you're going to do then. And maybe they just sold him on, hey, you're going to be a part of it. You're going to compete. At Oregon, he's probably number one corner in the class.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I'm good with it. I just don't have that knowledge. But a kid like that can play free safety, he can play nickel, and he can play corner. But that's all theoretical. If he's dead set on playing like one spot, once you get into that, kids don't pick the schools you necessarily think. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because, by the way, if you're willing to play more spots, your value to this thing they call the National Football League goes way up. I actually had a conversation with Braylon Womack about that at Future 50 this week at a kid Ohio State might end up getting. He's like, he's like, if you tell them that you're just playing one spot, you're going to be standing right over here on the sideline next to coach because your opportunities for playing time aren't there. This is a really astute kid. He's like a 3.8 GPA kid. I'm like, this guy's, he understands. Maybe Brew's that kid. I don't know. But I just thought he was going to Ohio State. I hadn't heard anything different. And then all of a sudden, they're the Oregon Ducks. That's recruiting in 2024.
And I think that's honestly going to be something that we're going to see more of the Ohio State-Oregon recruiting battles along with battles on the football field. And I think now I was not watching college football consistently back in the 90s when Penn State joined Ohio State. Joined the Big Ten. But I do think this could be somewhat of a similar path to where Penn State's a really good football program, Oregon's good football program, where if Ohio State and Oregon play every year like Ohio State and Penn State did ever since Penn State joined the Big Ten, that could be some of those things where it's not just battles on the football field, but the Buckeyes and the Ducks are battling even in recruiting for the same players.
I think that the proximity thing traditionally is always going to be the reason you recruit an area or whatever. But the Big Ten is now going to put something, and I love to do charts on this stuff, like where you recruit, it's national. So, and maybe Florida State or Clemson or something ends up in the Big Ten. Who knows? That stuff with the whole grant of right things with Florida State and Clemson and all that is crazy. But now you're playing a game in Maryland one week.
Mm-hmm.
Then you turn around and you're in Los Angeles to play the Bruins, etc. Your staff will have a chance to recruit more nationally. And, of course, L.A. is, whether they want to admit it or not, is where Oregon's home base is for recruiting.
Yeah.
The state of Oregon's terrible for high school football recruiting overall. So you're going to run into them more. I wonder if that's part of the reason they're already banging heads because kids know and they're have enough foresight to look at it. I think that's kind of cool. Right now, though, Ohio State should take advantage, just like Oregon always has, and recruit California a little more. It's Ohio State. It's not hard. Even if you just get one more kid out of L.A., like a Mater Day or a John Bosco or something, hey, that's the deal. But you're seeing it more now. You even see it on the East Coast. Like Oregon just got the Finney kid out of Maryland or whatever. It's a really good player. This is bizarre. I love it, though. It's more fun because it used to be you could tell me the prospect, the position in the high school, and I could probably name 3 out of his top 5 within 2 seconds. Now in recruiting, it's so wild. A Texas player might end up at Penn State. A Maryland kid might end up at Oregon. Those things when I was growing up did not exist.
Brian, from a couple of guys that were Ohio State targets that went to committed to play football on the West Coast, there's a kid in the Midwest that is still an Ohio State target, and I believe he's making a decision about where he's going to play football later this week. Damian Shanklin is next, and I understand why Ohio State wants him. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We talked about this kid before, Brian, and I was kind of waiting and pushing it off because naturally I'm kind of inclined to talk about kids that are from the area that I grew up in the country in Indiana. But I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And then I realized, wait, Shanklin's going to announce his commitment on July 5th, a day after the 4th of July. And he's a really good player, 6'4", about 230. And Ohio State and other elite schools are trying to get him. And it would be great if Ohio State could add this guy to their recruiting class.
Natural pass rushers do not grow on trees, Mr. Stevens.
No.
Ohio State needs more, just like every other school. It's fairly local to him. He's on the east side of Indianapolis. He's about 3 hours and 20 minutes from Ohio State's campus. Perfect. So it's a straight shot on I-70 for him. The question is, can he play early? Because he might have a chance by his sophomore year to be like the guy. You never know. They got competition, but this kid's really twitchy. He's got some power. He's got some pop. He's very flexible. National recruit. His list is bizarre. You and I were talking about that off air. Ohio State and predominantly schools down south. That's not normal for an Indiana kid, to say the least. But whatever. That's, again, the era that we live in. I think Ohio State's going to get him. They've been trending with him for a long time. But after what we just talked about a few minutes ago, I am 100% gun shy. So I'm not trying to ruin Ohio State's chances by picking them, so I'm not going to say anything. But everything I was told several months ago was that Ohio State was the school to watch. Maybe that'll find itself to be true later this week.
One of the things that I like about him, and I always ask you about what's the competition like where the kid plays. Well, I actually know the area very well from where he plays at Warren Central High School. He's getting the best competition in Indiana every single weekend.
Sure.
Center Grove, Carmel, other schools in the area. And so I'm not worried about the competition that he's playing. Like where some kids, like, I don't know the area, so I need Brian to let me know, well, is this competition good? Is it going to be like a major learning curve where he's good, but he's not playing elite competition every weekend? No, this guy is getting the coaching. He's getting coached. I think his coach actually has won multiple state championships too. So he's getting that in with him every single day. I like him. The one thing you talk about the twitchiness, he already has the height in good size already. Now, he's going to add on weight once he gets to school. But currently the way he's made up, talking about playing early, I can see him playing year 2 because he's not normal. The twitchiness that he has, he's able to bend very well, very well. You don't teach that. And I understand why Larry Johnson wants him. I just also realized, Brian, once he commits, you got to keep recruiting him because if you don't, somebody else will pull him away from you.
That's a player that he'll have offers, Oregon included probably, all the way to signing day. Because of his position, it's a premium spot. Arguably the second most important in recruiting is an edge rusher behind quarterback to get after the quarterback. So I'm curious to see if he shuts it down because the list of schools that he has, like the Alabama, Texas, those schools do not care one iota who's committed and who's not.
No.
And the NIL money at some of these schools and stuff, it's wild. I have no idea how that will play out. But again, this is a really important target. If you take nothing else away from this as an Ohio State fan, and assuming Shanklin commits to the Buckeyes, one could argue he's the most important recruit in the class because he's a pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
Name a team that competes for a title without a pure pass rusher. There isn't one.
Mm-hmm.
Every year you need to try to get one. There's only about 10 or so in the country a year that the schools like privately really want. And everybody else, okay, he needs this. We got to do that. The kids that can play early as pass rushers are very small list. Shanklin is one of them. And I think he might be the most important guy they have on the board.
So you make a very good point. I'm going to ask you something about the current team at Ohio State, not so much recruiting. Are Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau good enough pass rushers for Ohio State to need them to be so good? Let me change that up. Are Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau the type of pass rushers Ohio State needs to win a national championship?
You can do it with those guys because they also have some size to them. When you're looking at 240 and up and can rush the passer, it's one thing. But both those guys, they're big dudes. it's rare to have guys well over 250 that can rush by just speed rushing. To have two of them that have experience, that have started, there may not be another school in the country that has that quite like them. That's a good group. Now, the only question is on 3rd and 9,
Yeah.
if you're just talking about a wide 7 guy,
Yeah.
the traditional 6'3", 245 guy, kind of like an old school Florida State guy,
Mhm.
Ohio State doesn't have one of those right
No.
now that's experienced. They have a few other guys kind of in that realm, and they got a couple other guys that are really, really good in terms of talent. But that's the only thing I worry about, because the power and the natural size, Ohio State's loaded with that. Getting that edge and just making the quarterback feel like, okay, there's no way I have to step up. There's no other choice. And he gets happy feet early in the game. You get a kid, it's in his head. You get a couple of those kind of pass, it'll really mess with him. But like JT in particular, there aren't many guys that are better big game players than him. I'll take him on 3rd and 6 as sure as any guy in the country. He played like against Michigan or Notre Dame or any of their games that they played in the last couple of years. When he needs to make a play, he just seems to. Sawyer started to come on last year to a certain degree too. Now I just want to see them do it against elite teams all the time and not just like one big moment, like more consistency. But I think you win a national title with those two. Yes.
Brian, so there's a guy, a defensive lineman that's not in the class of 2025, but in class of 2026, in Jahkeem Stewart. And after Trajan Odom committed to Ohio State last weekend, I was reading an article, and it reminded me about something with Stewart that might impact Ohio State recruiting in this cycle right now. There's been a lot of talk about Stewart reclassifying. I don't know what you've heard. I'm going to hear it here in a second. But there's people saying Stewart may go from class of 2026 to class of 2025, and not saying he's going to Ohio State or not, but if he does reclassify, that just intensifies the pursuit of Ohio State to get Stewart to leave the Bayou to come to Columbus. What are you hearing about the possibility of Stewart reclassifying to join the class of 2025?
Well, I interviewed him a couple days ago at Future 50 down in Bradenton, and a whole bunch of us are swarmed around him. And he's arguably the best player in the 26 class. You could certainly make that argument. He's 6'6", 277, and svelte. Okay, not a lot of guys are built like Jahkeem. And he loves football. Pass rusher. This is a kid, to put it in perspective, as an 8th grader, won the Rivals New Orleans camp.
Jeez.
As an 8th grader.
Jeez.
So, yeah, I've never heard anything like that before. But a great kid, very, very humble. He's had a really hard upbringing, and he's still really humble. He's the kind of guy you root for. But his visits, and who always looked at, like, he's getting ready to go visit Miami. He's been to Oregon. LSU's the home school. That's kind of self-explanatory. Ohio State's recruiting. Literally, it's every corner of the country. So we asked him, like, what's your timeline? And I had no idea. I'm standing next to the guy just to ask him. And he said, the middle of this next season. And the red light went on. I'm like, okay. I didn't even ask him about the movement, the class, because there's no reason to commit. Barring something unforeseen, he's going to reclass, is my guess, because that doesn't make sense. The only other thing with that, and take it for what it's worth, this is a kid that's a lot more mature than other people his age, especially for what he's been through. Jahkeem's really got his head on straight, and he doesn't know where he's going. There's one, he's just going to LSU. I'm telling you, it's not a lock for that. He's looking at this open-endedly on every visit. He really likes Miami, he liked Oregon, etc. Anybody could get this kid, and he said he'd like to make a decision the middle of this next season.
Do you think Ohio State can pull him from the South?
I don't think he's a kid that you can put a cap on. He's not like hardly anybody else. He knew as an 8th grader he was different.
Okay.
And when I first met him and he came up and shook my hand like he was a little nervous, blah, blah, blah. He was that kid like 3 years ago that was a little surprised about the situation he was in. But now when you talk to him, he's like a 22-year-old. Like he's really matured. And he's taken a bunch of visits, and it's helped him. He's probably got a lot of people around him who understand, okay, we're a little different. We need to make sure this goes well. So I don't think there's really a team. And I'm sure people in the Bayou are throwing things at their TVs right now as they watch this on YouTube. But I'm telling you, he's not a lock for any one school. He's not. He really wants to look at things and keep an open mind. I know Miami thinks they got a legit shot, etc. I haven't asked anybody on the Ohio State side, but this is an interesting recruitment, because if he wants to enroll early, I didn't ask the date. I hope he doesn't try to swing it all the way to January. He needs to enroll next summer. But all the schools want the kids early as possible, and they don't care about their high school academics. It's just true. If he goes through the process and finishes next spring or whatever, he'd be better off. Give him more time. But if he commits early, one thing that's going to do is intensify his recruitment too.
That is true. Speaking of intensifying recruitment, Ohio State currently has 2 running backs in the recruiting class, and it appears like they're pursuing more. We're going to talk about a couple guys that Ohio State would potentially love, to join the 2025 recruiting class. I've been waiting for this part of the show the entire time because Brian and I are kind of on the same page here when it comes to this. I'll share my thoughts about the whole recruiting 3 running backs and getting 3 guys assigned later on. But Brian, there's a guy down there. I do believe it's Anthony Rogers from Montgomery, Alabama, another Alabama kid that's currently committed to Alabama, but Ohio State's pursuing him still. 5'8", 190. He's a good back. But Brian, he's a little short.
He is electric.
Yes, he is.
He was at IMG. He transferred to Carver. He is just a burner. Nobody tackles him in space. As a freshman, he played with Quinshawn at Pike Road High School, just outside. Then he transferred to IMG for 2 years. Now he's at Carver. When they had Quinshawn, okay, well, what are we going to do with this kid? Well, we'll just put him in the slot. As a freshman, he had 1,000 yards.
Oh, goodness.
So he's not a running back.
Okay.
He's a football player. He's not the biggest guy, but you can't tackle him in space very easily. Like, even with IMG's schedule, he would make guys look just dumb. In IMG practices with my own eyes, he made guys look dumb, and they got to have all Power 5 linebackers. So I could care less how tall he is. I'm not saying he's Barry Sanders, but electric. He'll be a sub 4.5 guy on any day of the week. He's going to be a guy that's also going to occasionally get below 4.4. He's a guy that's going to carry the load between the tackles sometimes. He's as rare as it gets. I have no idea what Alabama has or has not done. But with Kalen DeBoer's offense, it would not be fair if they had this kid. If they let him go, that is on them. I will laugh all day long. And I know living in Auburn, Alabama, there'll be people here that breathe a sigh of relief. Auburn would love to flip him. Like, he was perfect for Kalen DeBoer's offense, but he'd work really well in Ryan Day's offense too. I just don't think he's the same running back thing that we were talking about earlier, as long as you play him in the slot quite a bit. But it still brings up the question you and I had. You've already got 2. So are you counting Rogers as a running back, a slot, or an athlete? I would love to know what Ohio State is thinking on this, because they got 2 really good running backs in their class. What am I missing here? What am I missing? Because I would just take a veteran portal guy that can pass protect, that can block, maybe a little fullback kind of action this next year. And then these young good backs, you'd be fine. If Rogers wants to come, you can play him as full-time slot. He's that talented. But it is weird. They're still going after a 3rd running back. I don't understand.
I don't get it. I think it's kind of the conversation you have, or we often have, between is it portal recruiting or high school recruiting, and trying to get a healthy balance between the two. Realistically, not even hypothetically, realistically, Ohio State could be without, they're going to lose Henderson automatically. They can lose Judkins at the end of the season. So your top 2 backs are both going up to the NFL. The next 2 backs are both true freshmen currently. So they're going to be redshirt freshmen next year, because they're not going to play that much this year. And so you're going to get 2 guys next year that are really inexperienced. They know the playbook, but they're inexperienced, don't really play. And then let's just assume that West and Jackson both sign. They're incoming freshmen. So do you want to bring in a 3rd freshman in that class and just say, oh, well, we're going to have 5 running backs, and combined they may have 10 carries. That's what we're going to roll out into the season? That'd be stupid. Like, I'm not going to try to sugarcoat this or anything. That'd be very, very dumb. So, Brian, to me, it would make more sense to keep Jackson, keep West, do what you have to do to make sure they sign. And then next offseason, or maybe really December, you go out there, go to the portal, and get somebody from a group of 5 school. You mentioned Toledo off air, or maybe it be a lower level Big Ten school, seeing this guy has some experience. He can play up a little bit, be our 2nd, 3rd back. And then we get a guy that has the experience that we need, working with a lot of young talent in the room. That would make a whole lot of sense. Or, Brian, go out there and get 2 guys in the portal. Like, do something to bring some type of experience to the room if you want to have 5 guys. But don't make it Peoples and Williams-Dixon, and then Jackson, West, and then one of these other guys we're talking about, and make it another high school kid. To me, Brian, that's a recipe for disaster.
You need at least 1 senior in your running back room. even if it's not the most talented guy. And oftentimes it's not, because the most talented guy leaves after his junior year, barring injury. Because, like, Travion would have been gone if he hadn't been banged up last year. We all know. Now, does that guy have to be a stud in any one category? Not necessarily, but I bet you money he's a better pass protector on 3rd and 6. Do you want Peoples back there pass blocking, or the 6'1", 220-pound kid that played 4 years at Toledo and is a 5th year? That's just how I look at it. And I love Lachlan as a coach and all that, and maybe they just don't want to take – I don't know. But, like, running back is a different kind of recruiting deal now. You got to look at it broader because they're responsible for your quarterback with these pass protections, especially in Ohio State's offense. As much as they throw the ball, if your first-string quarterback gets hurt, it's over. Because you go through all that folk, it's a harder playbook. It's more reps. There's no way to circumvent that. You're done. Now, they got a lot of quarterback talent, but those guys, you don't get the reps.
No.
Either you're taking on the first-team reps or you are not. Talent is not the dictator for wins and losses there. That's why quarterback is annoying to every person on the planet. It's not fixable.
Nope.
So if you go into next year with the sophomores and freshmen at running back, I will come on your show and gladly predict 3 losses. Mark it down. I don't know what their schedule will be in 25, but they'll lose at least 1 or 2 because of the running back situation. Fumbles, missed blocks, drop passes, run the wrong route, whatever. That's what freshman, sophomore running backs often do, especially if you don't have a leader helping them. Prove me wrong.
Brian, there's one other guy that I saw that Ohio State will be going after, still pursuing if they're going after a 3rd running back right now in this recruiting class. Shakai Mills-Knight out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, 6'1", 217. I saw one database had him as a 3-star. I watched the film. This dude can play. No, he ain't no 3-star at all. Kind of like Isaiah West being a 3-star. Neither one of them fit the criteria of a 3-star on the film. He got his Ohio State offer on April 3rd. What do you see when you watch his film?
That's a kid that will charge downhill and take on a rhino, first off. The team he plays for, the Baylor school in Chattanooga, is a boarding school.
Okay.
They get kids from all over. They're whooping some, quite a bit. So, I mean, their plays like the guard is 5 yards down the field. Pushing so he's got holes. So now you just got to maximize. And he's pretty size. He's pretty fast. Trying to think of like somebody to compare him to, but I mean, just any 215-pound running back that runs behind his pads, that fits him. But he's got a little more wiggle than most guys, in my opinion. And I also think that he's just, from communicating, he's a great guy. He'll fit into any locker room. Auburn wants him. Miami wants, like his list is very broad. I'm curious, like what he's looking for, because he's got options all over. I think Tennessee's after him, etc. Like, long list. Anybody can use this kind of guy because he'll be able to pass protect long term. He'll catch the ball, and he's a power runner with some speed. Not a 3-star guy.
No, not at all. Do you think he would fit in with Bo Jackson and Isaiah West? Let's just say the Buckeyes do sign 3 guys. Do you think all 3 of those guys would fit in together?
No. 3's too many.
Yes.
One of them is going to transfer. Maybe that's their approach. I know that'll probably irk some people, but like if somebody leaves, so be it. That's where they're at quarterback pretty much everywhere. Quarterback's is a different deal. The running back is more about numbers and consistency on the depth chart, which, however, it's worked out. Ohio State has none of. Yeah. But it's bizarre, really. It's part of it's just bad luck. But guys get hurt, etc. But as long as you've got a talented guy that's a junior or senior in Ohio State's offense, and remember Jeremiah is about to take over college football, you're going to be fine. Next year they're going to have sophomores and freshmen. So it's coming back to the same thing. Anthony Rogers, Mills-Knight, whoever, they need a veteran no matter how many running backs they sign out of the high school ranks. I am steadfast in that.
Really appreciate Brian Smith coming on the show once again. You can follow him on X at FBScout_Florida. You can follow me on the same platform at JStevens07. This has been Locked on Buckeyes here on a Monday. We'll see you next time.